思い出せへん。いや、そもそもの話。
Anyone unfamiliar with the Like a Dragon series might assume it's the gaming equivalent of a Weatherspoons, with poor acoustics, suffocating noise, confusing conversations, reused textures, and the constant anxious threat of erupting violence. And while it's true that at least 60% of your problems can be resolved by hitting menacing men with bicycles, the Yakuza games actually have a disarming emotional range. They're as much about reflective conversations on rooftops as they are about punching bears. They're the only games that let you crush an enemy's ass with a weaponized bollard and make you contemplate what it means to grow old in a world you no longer recognize.
悪くない響きやの。
This is exactly why Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is a less tantalizing prospect, in some respects, than yet another game set in Kamurocho. Its tale of cutlass-flashing derring-do, secret island hideaways, and 18th century galleons suggests a game with a thuggish disregard for subtlety. Even the choice of protagonist, the pleasantly unhinged Goro Majima, a man who, right now, you're probably imagining screaming, stabbing, or both, speaks to a heightened sense of throwaway irreverence. It's the sort of concept people who don't play Yakuza probably think series obsessives would love, when actually all we want is to try all the different whiskies at the Sunaku bar in the Champion District.
いただきます。ごちそうさん。
Against all expectations, however, this chaotic spin-off manages to feel rich and refreshing while still delivering the grandiose dramatic moments that make the series so wonderful.
もうなかなか良いけ。上等や。やれるもんならやってみえ。
Perhaps the most surprising thing is how quickly we're willing to accept the possibility that a series of career criminals would indeed choose to haunt the Pacific in tricked-out age-of-sail frigates. This isn't a throwaway joke, it does an incredible job of introducing an absurd collection of disparate ideas in the first few hours, with enough emotional heft and direction that we barely questioned why Japanese comedian Ryuji Akiyama was the new ship's cook, or indeed why we were on a ship in the first place.
もう観念してくださいよ。大丈夫。俺の新しい船長は命まで取りませんから。
あ？ そうなんか？けど俺ら海賊やろ。
The game maintains this clip over the course of its 18-odd-hour campaign, and despite the pace, it manages to introduce loads of new stuff without it becoming overwhelming. The side stories and mini-games are deftly woven into the main quest without ever feeling like narrative speed bumps, and we rarely felt like we were being told too much too soon, although there were a few occasions where we did have to backtrack into the upgrades menu to remind ourselves of what we'd unlocked. Some of the new additions are more compelling than others, though. We certainly spent more time cooking meals and fighting naval battles in our playthrough than we did saving strays for Majima's makeshift animal sanctuary, for instance. But it's lovely to know that stuff is there when we choose to go back to it. There's also a raft of other classic distractions, including arcades, a master system, dragon cart, swimming, photography, gambling, and more. It's enough to fill anyone aiming for 100% completion with a sense of nameless dread.
KO! I win!
The sailing is a short way of understanding the tone of Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. In the unlikely event you were worried about having to trim your sails, tack into the wind, and tell a clove hitch from a carrick bend, fret not. Everything that isn't fun, including sailing in the traditional gusty sense, is largely absent. If you want further evidence, all you really need to know is that your ship can boost, drift, and it has machine guns. The result is something utterly bizarre, an arcade twist on Master and Commander in which you can sling your 1,000-ton warship around the stern of an enemy ship and rake them with your laser cannons like you're playing Forza on the high seas. The limited use of boost means there are moments where your ship slows down and feels legitimately weighty, and an added sense of scale comes from being able to stroll around on deck whenever you want. But naval battles are usually swift and exhilarating. We actually found ourselves looking for fights when travelling between islands, which is a useful measure of how fun it is to sink enemy ships with juddering broadsides. Bigger naval encounters culminate with on-deck battles, which are huge, chaotic, and extremely silly. The fights themselves feel larger, lighter, and messier than many of the games that came before. This isn't a criticism, but it does feel different. Don't be surprised if you see Dynasty Warriors mentioned in the same breath in other reviews. Majima's Mad Dog style is most similar to what hardened veterans will recognise, whereas the Sea Dog iteration is essentially like controlling Soul Calibur's Cervantes in an open-world brawler. It's intuitive and immediate, but we did find it harder to find a rhythm that made us feel like we were in total control of what we wanted to do. Heat actions in particular feel more limited, with smaller windows of opportunity. There are still some moves that elicit genuine delight when you trigger them, such as Majima catching an enemy sword between his teeth, but the selection of heat actions feels narrower and less contextual. That said, the range of useful skills you have in combat is as varied as it's ever been, and we're not sure we can be too critical of a game that lets us shoot ancient pistols, snare enemies with a hook, and summon ghost sharks with a cursed fiddle. The other element that feels new is the sheer scale of the combat. There are some battles that feature literally hundreds of characters fighting at once, so the staid, focused fighting system of the pre-Dragon Engine games was never going to function here. Sometimes it feels like the outcomes are less about your own abilities as players and more about your capable army of nautical weirdos, but perhaps that's what it means to be the captain of a pirate ship. It's not all about you, until the game tells you it is. All of this somehow coalesces into something that works in defiance of itself. It still feels like a Yakuza game, despite being set completely outside of Japan. This, if anything, made us somehow more nostalgic. Drinking a Staminan spark in the glowing bowels of Madlantis feels like a British person packing Yorkshire tea and digestives for their holiday to Honolulu. It's also packed with minor characters and callbacks, such as tone-deaf karaoke oik Daisaku Minami, who most players will remember as the human flamethrower, often on the business end of Shun Akiyama's loafers in Yakuza 4. And without spoiling too much, there are some deeply satisfying moments late in the game for anyone curious to understand how Majima reconciles being a pirate captain with his former life as vice chairman of the Tojo clan. It's a measure of how adept Ryo Gaga Toko Studio is, and how good the localization team continues to be too. That an amnesiac criminal's hunt for mystical doubloons can somehow feel fun, weighty, throwaway, and engaging all at once. Thank you so much for watching this review of Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. If you enjoyed it and it helped you decide whether or not you want to spend your hard-earned doubloons on the game, please do give it a like and subscribe to Eurogamer for almost daily videos about video games. And if you fancy sticking with us for more reviews, you'll find a few of them on screen and clickable right now. Goodbye.
Central, Evil!